In the heart of the Montana wilderness, a young grizzly bear wandered too close to a deep, ice-cold lake. What started as a simple drink of water turned into a desperate fight for life as he slipped again and again on the frozen rocks. Hope faded, but sometimes, even when nature seems unforgiving, something or someone unexpected steps forward. Get ready for a story so raw, so heartbreaking, that it will stay with you long after it ends. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. It helps us bring you more true, emotional stories like this one. The lake was a mirror that morning, smooth, silent, deceptively peaceful. The kind of silence that made the forest itself seem to hold its breath. At the edge of that icy stillness stood a young grizzly, no more than 3 years old, a teenager in bare terms. His fur was thick with the last cling of winter, a deep cinnamon brown. His shoulders were already broad, but his instincts were still uncertain. He was called Moss by the few rangers who had tracked his movements from afar, not because they named wild animals lightly, but because he had a habit of rubbing himself against mossy trees along the riverbanks. To the people who cared, Moss was more than a number on a GPS collar, he was a survivor. That morning, Moss was thirsty. He had wandered farther than usual from his den, drawn by the faint smell of thawing earth and melting ice. Food was scarce this early in the season. He nosed along the treeline, his massive paws sinking into patches of wet, brittle snow. The lake beckoned, a glistening surface reflecting a pale sun struggling through thick clouds. Moss hesitated at the water's edge. The ice was thinning but not gone, the stones slick and treacherous beneath the melt. The slope was steep enough that even an experienced animal might tread carefully, but Moss was young, hungry, and tired. He stepped forward, one paw, then another. The ice cracked under his weight, a sharp, treacherous sound that tore through the stillness like a gunshot. Before he could shift back, the edge gave way, and Moss plunged into the freezing water with a crash, sending shards of ice spinning into the air. The cold was instant, paralyzing. Moss kicked powerful legs, thrashing against the shock, muscles seizing from the temperature. His claws scraped uselessly at the broken ice and the slimy stones. But each time he tried to pull himself out, he slipped back into the deep. His body was built for power, not finesse. Again and again, he lunged at the edge, and again, it betrayed him. On the ridge above the lake, 2 hikers paused. They heard the splashes, the heavy, frantic sounds of something fighting, not for territory, but for life. Through binoculars, they spotted the young bear, chest heaving, claws flashing, eyes wide with terror. The hikers argued in hushed tones. Should they call for help? Approach? Stay hidden? What could humans do for a drowning grizzly without risking their own lives? By the time they decided to radio for a ranger, precious minutes had already slipped away. Moss wasn't giving up, not yet. He found a small patch of rock that jutted out over the lake. His paws scrambled for purchase, his massive body heaving upward, chest almost clear of the water. But the rock was coated in ice. His claws screeched against the surface, and he fell back with a brutal splash that swallowed him whole. Only the ripples remained. The first responder was 20 minutes out. For Moss, 20 minutes might as well have been forever, and no one watching could shake the feeling that something was about to break, not just ice, but hearts. The cold was a thief. Every second Moss stayed submerged, the freezing water stole something from him, his strength, his heat, his hope. The powerful strokes that once propelled him through river crossings in the summer now faltered into clumsy, broken movements. His thick fur, usually a shield against the mountain cold, became a weight pulling him down. He lunged again for the rocky bank, claws outstretched, teeth bared in silent fury. For a moment, it looked like he might make it. His chest cleared the waterline, his shoulders heaving upward with a surge of desperate strength. But again, the ice betrayed him. The slick stones laughed in his face. He slipped and disappeared beneath the black surface once more. The hikers on the ridge paced in helpless circles. Their radio crackled with static, wildlife rescue en route 20 minutes. One of them, a young woman named Claire, couldn't stand it any longer. Against her friend's protests, she scrambled down the embankment, boots skidding through snow and loose gravel. She knew she couldn't wade into the water, she wouldn't survive the cold either. But maybe, just maybe, there was something she could do from the shore, anything. Moss broke the surface again, gasping, if a bear could gasp, mouth wide, eyes frantic. He turned in a slow, heavy circle, searching for a new foothold. There wasn't one. The lake was deep here too deep. His instincts screamed at him, climb, fight, survive. But his body was betraying him faster than the ice. Claire reached the shoreline. She tore off her backpack, pulling out anything she thought might help, a rope, a branch, even the bright red emergency tarp she carried for warmth. She waved it in the air, shouting, even though she knew he wouldn't understand. But Moss did see. Through the haze of cold and panic, the flash of color caught his eye. He turned toward her, and for a moment, a brief, incredible moment, Moss stopped thrashing. He focused. His massive paws churned the water. He made slow, clumsy progress toward the part of the shoreline where Claire stood, waving her arms. Each time he got closer, the water sucked him back, but he didn't give up, not yet. Claire's hands shook so hard she dropped the tarp into the snow. She wanted to wade in, she wanted to do something. But the truth was brutal, she couldn't save him with her hands. She could only offer something harder to give, hope. Behind her, she heard the roar of an approaching vehicle. The ranger was arriving. Help, real help, was almost here. But looking into Moss's glassy eyes as he struggled against the cold, Claire knew it might already be too late. Still, Moss fought, not because he thought he would win, but because in the wild, you fight until you have nothing left to give. And Moss wasn't done yet. The ranger truck skidded to a halt just behind the tree line. Out jumped Logan Rhee, 38, a field ranger known for two things, his calm in chaos and his unshakable belief that every life, human or animal, deserved a fighting chance. He didn't waste a second. Before the engine stopped rattling, Logan had grabbed the rescue kit from the back seat, ropes, poles, an emergency thermal blanket, and was sprinting downhill toward the lake. Claire met him halfway, breathless. "He's still alive," she cried, pointing to the water. "But he's slipping under." Logan didn't wait for the full sentence. One glance at the lake told him everything. Moss was floundering in slow motion now. The frantic energy that had kept him alive for the last hour was gone. His massive head bobbed lower each time he surfaced. His legs barely churned the freezing water. His strength was almost gone. It was a matter of minutes, maybe seconds. Logan knew the rules. Approaching a drowning grizzly, even a cub, even a weakened one, was dangerous beyond measure. A terrified animal could lash out, panic could make him turn violent without meaning to. But he also knew something deeper, this bear wasn't fighting him, he was fighting for himself. And Logan couldn't watch that battle end from the shore. He threw the end of the rope to Claire, barking quick instructions, "Tie it to the pine trunk. Fast." He looped the other end around his waist, tied a rescue knot, and waded into the icy water. Every nerve in his body screamed at the cold. It stabbed through his clothes, into his skin, into his lungs. Still, he pushed forward. Moss saw him for a moment, his body stiffening with primal fear and distrust. But then Moss simply stopped struggling. He floated, exhausted, his massive body bobbing helplessly in place as Logan reached him. One hand extended, no sudden moves, no shouting, just presence. Claire watched from the bank, hands knotted together, barely breathing. Logan reached Moss, his heart hammering against his ribs. He didn't try to grab the bear. Instead, he wrapped the rope loosely under Moss's front legs, the same way you might lift a fallen dog. Only this time, the animal weighed nearly 200 pounds and was pure muscle. It took 3 tries, 3 agonizing slips where Moss's body nearly dragged them both under. But Logan didn't let go. Finally, with Claire pulling from the shore, Logan dragging from the water, and Moss finding the last scraps of his strength to kick, they reached the rocky slope. Moss's claws scraped the stones once, twice. He slipped back, but Logan anchored his body low, digging his boots into the silt. "Come on," he growled through gritted teeth. "Come on, big guy. It's just a little more." Moss lunged. One paw found a grip, then the second. With a final, shuddering heave, he pulled half his body onto the rock. Logan stumbled backward onto the frozen bank, gasping for air, water pouring off his jacket. Claire dropped the rope and rushed to help stabilize them both. Moss lay motionless, ribs heaving, alive but barely. Logan knelt beside him, numb fingers checking the bear's sides for movement. The faint rise and fall of breath answered him. He sat back, soaked and shaking, and whispered into the frigid morning air, "You made it." But the fight wasn't over. Moss's body was hypothermic. If they couldn't warm him fast, he would slip away right there on the shore he had fought so hard to reach. Neither Logan nor Claire was ready to lose him now, not after all he had survived. The wind cut across the lake like a blade. Logan knew the signs of hypothermia, not just in humans, but in animals, too. Shallow breathing, unfocused eyes, body going stiff. Moss was teetering on the edge. The bear's massive frame trembled violently on the rocky shore. His paws splayed out unnaturally. His fur, soaked and matted, offered almost no insulation anymore. It was like watching a giant heart slowly dim. Claire hovered nearby, wrapping herself in her jacket, her face pale with fear. "What do we do?" she whispered. Logan's mind raced. There was no heated stretcher, no tranquilizers, no special equipment for a wet, semi-conscious Grizzly, just rope, a tarp, his own instincts, and the impossible task of convincing an animal not to give up. He made his decision fast. "Get the emergency tarp," he ordered Claire, "and the mylar blankets from the truck." She sprinted off, boots crunching over the frozen ground. Meanwhile, Logan moved closer to Moss, slowly, deliberately, no sudden moves. Moss's half-lidded eyes tracked him weakly, but the bear didn't lift his head. He was too far gone for fear, or maybe he trusted Logan. Logan knelt beside him, removed his soaked jacket, ignoring the way the cold clawed into his skin, and spread it over Moss's shoulders like a rough blanket. Then he pressed his hands into the bear's fur, trying to create friction, anything to push warmth back into the collapsed body. "Stay with me," Logan murmured under his breath. "You didn't come this far to die now." Claire returned, panting, carrying a bundle of crinkling emergency foil. They wrapped Moss as best they could, awkward, inefficient, but it trapped heat against his core. Logan leaned into the bear's side, sharing body warmth the way mother bears shield their cubs in winter dens. The minutes crawled by, no movement, no sound but the rasp of Logan's breathing and the low ripple of the lake. Then, after what felt like a lifetime, a tremor ran through Moss's chest, a low, rumbling grunt, almost a sigh. His paw twitched just slightly, but it was enough. Logan closed his eyes, a shudder of relief coursing through him. "He's fighting," he said hoarsely. "He's still fighting." The second ranger team arrived 10 minutes later, carrying heavier equipment, portable heaters, a makeshift stretcher, medical supplies. They moved carefully around Moss, who by then was semi-conscious, his breathing steadier but shallow. It took 6 people to lift him onto a board reinforced with heavy canvas. As they secured the bear, Logan knelt one last time by Moss's head. He pressed 2 fingers to the wet fur between Moss's ears. "You're not done yet, big guy. You're just getting started." The rescue convoy pulled away, tires crunching over frozen earth. Inside the truck bed, wrapped in layers of warmth, Moss lay still, but there was a spark now, a stubborn flickering flame where only darkness had been. And sometimes, Logan knew, that's all survival really is. The Wildlife Rehabilitation Center wasn't built for animals like Moss. It was designed for birds with broken wings, foxes hit by passing cars, the occasional deer orphaned by poachers. Not for a grizzly bear who had wrestled death and won, barely. Still, they made space. They always did when it mattered. Moss was placed in an isolated enclosure, a wide fenced meadow with access to a heated shelter and fresh water. No tourists, no cameras, only the soft crackle of radios and the occasional rustle of boots on gravel. Logan visited daily. He sat outside the fence for hours, bundled against the Montana chill, watching Moss sleep, eat, and slowly, painfully begin to heal. The first few days were terrifying. Moss barely moved. He refused food. He shivered constantly. His breathing stayed shallow and uneven. The staff whispered in grim tones. Hypothermia left unseen scars, not just physical, but neurological. If Moss couldn't recover fully, if he couldn't fend for himself, the words hovered in the air, unspoken but heavy. Logan refused to hear them. Every morning, he showed up, sat, waited, talked softly through the chain-link fence, told Moss about the river thawing, about the elk herds moving again, about the wild that was waiting for him. On the 5th day, something shifted. Logan was sipping bitter coffee from a thermos when he noticed Moss stir slowly, as if every joint protested. The young bear lumbered to his feet. He didn't walk far, just a few unsteady steps across the straw-covered floor, but it was enough. Logan exhaled a breath. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. The vet called it a turning point. Logan called it a miracle. Recovery wasn't smooth. Moss had muscle damage, possibly frostbite in 2 toes, and lingering weakness that left him unbalanced and easily winded. But there was something burning in him stronger than any injury, a stubborn will to live. Each day he grew stronger. Each day, he walked a little farther, ate a little more, growled a little louder when staff approached, the best sign of all. But with strength came a painful decision. The Board of Wildlife Management met to review Moss's case. Some argued he had been too compromised, too humanized by the rescue, and that reintroducing him to the wild would risk his safety or others. Euthanasia, one cold voice said, should not be ruled out. Logan stood before them, fists clenched at his sides. He told them about the lake, the struggle, the fight Moss had given when there was nothing left to fight with. He ended with a single sentence, if he was willing to give everything to live, the least we can do is give him the chance to try. The board agreed, barely. Moss would be released back into protected land, but there would be no second rescue. If he failed, he would fail as nature intended. It wasn't cruelty, it was respect. Logan signed the papers with a hand that shook only once. He looked out the center window at the young bear resting in the meadow beyond the fence, and he whispered, "You got one shot, big guy. Make it count." The morning of the release dawned cold and clear. The world outside the rehabilitation center shimmered with frost, the last breath of winter clinging stubbornly to the earth. It was perfect, wild, raw, the way it should be. Moss was ready. Over the past weeks, he had rebuilt himself, not into the same bear who had slipped into that frozen lake, but into something stronger. His fur gleamed with health. His muscles rippled with new life, and his eyes, those deep amber eyes, burned with a quiet, smoldering fire. He no longer flinched at shadows. He no longer stumbled when he walked. Moss had remembered who he was. The journey to the release site took nearly 2 hours. A secure trailer transported him into the protected wilderness reserve, 40,000 acres of untouched mountains, rivers, and forests, far from any highways, farms, or humans. The land was ancient, untamed, waiting. Logan drove behind the transport truck, heart pounding with every bump in the dirt road. Beside him sat Claire, who refused to let the bear go alone without seeing him free. Neither spoke much, there was nothing left to say. At the drop-off point, a grassy clearing overlooking a river bend, the team worked in silence. They opened the trailer gate. For a moment, nothing happened. Moss stood inside, nostrils flaring, breathing in the wild air he hadn't tasted in months. Logan felt the lump rise in his throat. He didn't call out. He didn't move. He just waited. Finally, Moss stepped down, one heavy paw, then another. His body moved low to the ground at first, instinctively weary. But after a few steps, he lifted his head high. He sniffed the wind, turned toward the trees, and ran, not away from them, but toward something, toward home. Claire wiped her eyes quickly, pretending it was just the wind. Logan didn't bother to hide his. They watched as Moss bounded through the clearing, across a shallow stream, and disappeared into the dense green of the forest beyond. No tracking collar, no human tags, only freedom. "He made it," Claire whispered. Logan nodded. He earned it. The forest swallowed Moss without a sound, as if he'd never been there. But Logan knew better. The bear would leave marks in ways no tracker could follow, deep claw scratches on trees, paw prints in the wet earth, whispers in the wind. Signs that he had survived. Signs that he had lived. Sometimes, when the wild calls back something you thought was lost forever, you listen, and you believe. Seasons passed. The river thawed. The mountains shed their white crowns. The forest sang again with the sharp cries of hawks and the low rustle of elk through the brush. But Logan never stopped thinking about Moss. He returned to the release site whenever his duties allowed, boots crunching along the same trails, binoculars slung around his neck more out of habit than hope. He never saw Moss again, not directly, but he saw signs. There were claw marks high on an old aspen tree, higher than any bear in the area could reach, except one of unusual size. There were overturned stones along the riverbeds, revealing mussels and grubs, exactly the way Moss had been taught to forage. There were paw prints, broad and deep, pressed into soft mud near the trout streams after a heavy rain. And once, just once, Logan found a patch of flattened grass near a game trail, still warm, as if something large and powerful had rested there. He knelt beside it, placed his hand on the imprint, closed his eyes, and in the hush of the forest, he heard it, not a growl, not a roar, just the living breath of a creature who refused to quit. An echo of survival. Claire kept in touch too. She sent him articles sometimes, sightings of large solitary grizzlies in the region, photos taken from long distances, grainy but clear enough to show a thick-furred bear moving through wildflower fields or along ridgelines under stormy skies. In every photo, Logan swore he recognized something in the posture, the pride, the strength, the second chance made flesh. In the ranger station, pinned to the back wall where tourists couldn't see it, Logan kept a single photograph. A blurry snapshot of moss from the day of the release, frozen mid-leap across the shallow stream, water exploding around him like fireworks. Above it, he had tacked a handwritten quote, "Some stories don't need witnesses. They just need to be lived." One winter night, long after the tourists had gone and the snow had started to fall heavy once again, Logan sat alone on the ranger cabin porch. He sipped coffee that had long since gone cold, watched the snow drift in lazy spirals, and listened, not for anything loud, but for a whisper, a crack of a twig, a shift of the wind. Somewhere out there, in a thicket, on a ridge, by a hidden lake, a bear was moving, strong, wild, free. And Logan knew he hadn't saved Moss. Moss had saved himself. All Logan had done was believe. If this story touched your heart, remember, survival isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet decision to keep fighting. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this story with someone who still believes in second chances. Let's keep the wild strong and keep believing in the unseen heroes.